Yeah, and there's the troubling figures behind the headline figure in which, as you say, stuck stubbornly at 8.7% for the consumer price inflation index, measure of inflation, static. An example right before our eyes of the stickiness is the word we've been using, isn't it? But inflation failing to come down despite the two biggest drivers, certainly at the start of the global inflation spike, was energy prices. Well, that inflation is falling, and food price inflation, which has been maintaining these high levels, certainly not rising as fast. But if we go below that headline number and look at core inflation, which is exactly what will be happening at the Bank of England and at the Treasury and elsewhere, so in the city today, core inflation is rising up to 7.1%. That's up 0.3% on April. It's been rising since March. And what that indicates is, despite taking out the global external factors of food and energy, internal UK domestic inflation driven by things like services, the cost of goods and services, all rising in the year to May, and also wage inflation. We were talking about this last week, and this was a figure that spooked the markets and set expectations for interest rates higher last week. Wage inflation up 7.2%. There might now be a debate about whether this is a sign of a price-wage spiral or a wage-price spiral. Which way round those come will inform the policy choices that are made. But nevertheless, it's indicative that inflation is becoming embedded in the jargon. That's been the fear since the start of this, that the external factors would fade, but the rising prices, the very tight labour market would push wages up, and those two factors would feed each other. What does it mean? Well, it means for tomorrow, it feels like it cements in a rise in interest rates tomorrow. The markets are now, the expectation now for the peak of interest rates has risen this morning to 6% by the end of the year. It's 4.5% the base rate today, expecting at least a 0.25 percentage point rise tomorrow, perhaps half a percentage point being pushed for. But the markets believe that the peak has risen. That's risen as also as two-year gilt yield number that we've been watching ever since the mini-budget. Yesterday, it went past. In fact, last week, the post-Liz Truss peak, it's risen again this morning. The markets are not happy about this. We've heard the Chancellor there in our introduction talking about how he's going to back the Bank of England. Well, there's a political pledge on this as well. The government has pledged to bring down inflation by half by the end of the year, also to grow the economy and to cut government debt. And all three of those pledges are looking a more questionable target than perhaps they did when they were made. So there's political prices perhaps to pay, but there's a very real price to be paid by homeowners and consumers before then.